Hi, and welcome or welcome back to the Future of SaaS Festival. We hope you're enjoying the presentation so far. Just a quick reminder, if you're not already a member of our Slack community, follow the link at the top of the event website to network and join the discussion.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to SaaS Trends for 2021 and beyond. I'm Anna Tallarico. I'm going to be moderating our session today. A little bit of background, and then I'm going to introduce our panelists. I'm a operating partner at Arthur Ventures. We invest in B2B software companies that are located outside of Silicon Valley. And in my role as an operating partner, I work with our companies after investment across their go-to-markets just to help them scale more quickly and efficiently. Prior to that, I was a SaaS founder with a couple of strategic exits. So SaaS is in my blood for sure. And I'm super excited about the panel we have here today. I'm going to have everybody just give a quick introduction of themselves and their background, and then we're going to get started and talk about some of the things that we're seeing across SaaS this year and coming into next year as well. Julio, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. So, well, thanks for having me. I'm Giulio Zini, current head of partnership at Rocket Chat, the ultimate communication platform that help companies all across the globe to streamline their communications. Prior to that, I have been working for about 10 years for tech companies in all these experiences in roles regarding partnerships, alliances, and ecosystem. So glad to be here.
We're so excited to have you. Isabel, you're next in my view.
Yeah, hi, thanks Anna and everyone for joining us today. And I want to thank as well the Future of SaaS team for inviting me to be part of this great panel. So my name is Isabel Ruiz. I'm a senior customer success manager at Pluralsight, and I have been working in customer success approximately 7 years, close to 8 years. And I have seen both sides from account management, sales, and now customer success. And actually back in February, I launched a micro podcast called CSM Toolbox. So I would really appreciate a listen, and feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and Twitter as well. Thanks.
Awesome. And Marvin, last but definitely not least.
Hi, everyone. Thanks again for having me at the Future of SaaS event. So a bit about my background. Did the startup thing many years ago, come from marketing background. Was a tech exec at Yahoo for many years. So did the enterprise sales stuff. And most recently was a partner of 500 startups. So I was there for about 6 years, invested in over 414 pre-seed and seed stage startups. And most of them were SaaS companies. So some companies that you probably heard about in our portfolio that I invested in: Aircall, ManyChat, Rapid API, Shippo. So, I would say, not surprising or unsurprising, I think a lot of my best performing companies were actually SaaS companies. I left 500 about a year and a half ago, and now I sit on several investment committees of different VC funds, and I sit on 2 boards of a gaming company where it's a gaming holding company. So we invest as well as have a lot of operating companies. We have 2 very, very, very large SaaS companies in this business, and I also sit on the board of a company called Avocado, which is actually an ad tech space doing product-led growth. So it's a SaaS business too.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody. We're excited to dig in. What was great was when the 4 of us got together to talk about trends, there was a lot of the same things that we're all seeing. So we're excited to talk about those today. Some of the things we're just going to hit are usage-based pricing. If you're living and breathing SaaS, this has probably come across your radar in some way, and we want to talk a little bit about that. Also, the rise of marketplaces as a customer acquisition channel. I think this is one where if we don't plan ahead, if we're not already thinking about this, we might be caught kind of flat-footed and off guard. So this is happening, and it's going to be happening pretty quickly. Another thing is partnerships and channel relationships, which, going back to the origins of SaaS, part of SaaS was selling direct to brands, and so you weren't really developing, significant partner and channel relationships. And we're seeing that trend really shift. And I think that's an important one for SaaS founders and operators as well. And then how all of this sort of ties into owning that customer relationship and the customer experience that we're expected to deliver when we have these kind of different channels of customer acquisition and the way that customers are coming into our universe. So we're going to hit all of that. Please feel free to ask questions along the way in chat. We'll definitely leave some time at the end for Q&A, but also we will try to answer questions as we're talking about these. The first one I want to dig into is usage-based pricing. I want to dig into this one because it's like literally every day, emails in my feed, founders asking me about this. If you go back again to sort of how SaaS pricing typically started, it was tier-based, maybe feature-based, often user seat-based. And what we're seeing now are the fastest growing companies, the companies that are adding the most significant enterprise value, are really leaning into usage-based pricing models. So, usage-based is more about you're paying for what you're consuming, and there's several different ways to structure that, but that's really what it is. OpenView recently had a stat that showed companies with usage-based pricing are growing 38% faster than their peers. So that's pretty significant if you think about, this pretty much of transformation in how customers are paying for the value that they're receiving and how we are sort of monetizing that value. So let's stop there. And I just want to open it up to first a question for the panel, which is, why do you think that usage-based pricing is gaining traction right now? Why are we suddenly hearing about this when it's something nobody was talking about a year ago? Marvin, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I actually think one of the first folks, that really pioneered was Amazon Web Services, right? Like you take credit card, pay as you go. And I have two views on why I think it's grown sort of the fastest, right? Number one, it's fairly easy to understand, right? Pay as you go, very, very simple it's not complex. I also think if you look at a lot of my guess, looking at the data when you shared that information earlier from OpenView, I dug into it a little bit more, where if you take a look at a lot of the fastest growing startups, they're actually SMB focused startups, right? Like they're focusing on sort of the customer segment. And I think if you look at the customer segment of SMB, this is a no-brainer, doing usage-based pricing. I do think it's very different if you're, not to say large enterprise customers can't use that either, right? But I do think they're used to, it's just a different type of sales process. And especially for product-led growth stuff, this is a no-brainer, right? Credit card, just like Amazon Web Services. I'm not sure like a company like Salesforce could do this.
And it's interesting. Christopher, actually one of our attendees, noted the cloud computing platforms have pushed the usage-based model, and we're going to talk about that too, because I definitely think it dovetails into what we're seeing into in terms of marketplaces for sure. Julio, what about you? What do you think? Why do you think that this is gaining so much traction right now?
Yeah, actually, my bet here is about the consumerization of technology. So because before, when technology was more restricted to like IT buyers and like IT departments and that traditional way to buy technology, there's pretty much like standardized models that were like the basic and the way that you used to buy and consume technology. But as now, technology is like part of our lives, and there's several products that you buy, and you buy in different models. Most of them subscription-based models, but in different way, and the prices goes to different like kind of drivers. I think that the buyer that is now not only in the IT department, but more and more in the business department, are just facing, but why should I pay for this or in that rule if that doesn't make sense for my business, or my business get penalized because, I scale much more in that specific point than the other way around. So I think that there's a lot about this as well that make like technology companies to face this kind of challenge and say, hey, I think that we need to adapt ourselves to the way that our buyers are now deciding to buy or willing to buy products like ours.
And it really does lower the barrier of entry, right? If you think about one of the reasons people don't get started with new products is the sort of fear, am I going to actually use it? Am I going to actually adopt it? So I think it really lowers that, and people can kind of see the value and then pay for it. and I think too, there's this just alignment, right? I think previously as SaaS companies, we were afraid to charge this way because we needed to lock in and know exactly what our pricing was. And we couldn't imagine a path where this would drive scale faster. But even to Martin's point about this, like you see it in the SMB, but what's interesting is to see companies like Twilio, where they have this model and their biggest customers are, paying millions of dollars a year on the same exact sort of model. So it works at the SMB level, and I think it does make a lot of sense there. But you see with some of these more modern companies that it's driving enterprise, sort of relationships as well, for sure. Do you think that companies who don't currently have usage-based pricing, can they switch over? Like Martin, you mentioned Salesforce and you can't see it working. I'm just kind of thinking about, can they switch over? And then I want to make sure we talk to Isabel too about like, how do you create the right customer experience around something like that? But do you think a company that's not been using usage-based can be switching over, or at least exploring it?
I will say that
Go for it.
Sorry, Marvin. I was just going to say that definitely will be more of a hybrid model. Like I will even see companies using that as well, just to try to maybe just enter the market. And I'm sure we are going to touch on this as well in terms of when it might not work very well. But I think for customers, and I'm thinking from the customer side as well, that, and something that Marvin and Julie were touching on already, that at least for the customer, it is possible to plan, to monitor, to maybe have some more control from their side, not only budgets, but if it's any sort of platform that requires X amount of users, licenses, etc. So for them, it is an easier, as you mentioned as well, and that barrier of entry for just a customer, okay, knowing that flexibility. And I think for those that they are not there yet, they can still try a hybrid model for sure.
Interesting. Yeah, it's like a way to step into it. Martin, what were you gonna say?
Yeah, I think what I was going to say was just, I think the you can do a hybrid model. I think it's very, very hard. Like a lot of it, I'm going to go back to the first point, but I think a lot of it is very, very much dependent on sort of who the customer segment they're going after and what the original go-to market was, right? So the reason, for example, not to say like Salesforce can go build something like this and reprice everything, but just like their go-to market, they have very, very, how should I say, an entrenched go-to market already, an organization. And it's just that inertia sometimes is very hard to work against, right? Granted, they've been around for 20 plus years, so maybe that's not a great example. But if it's company's been around for 1 or 2 years, I still think it's possible to switch, right? I think a lot of it just depends on what the customer segment is and how embedded their go-to market is.
I think that's right, for sure. I mean, even with, you think about this, kind of came out of some, of the product-led things that we're seeing, and it's the same thing, right? If you didn't sort of have a go-to-market around being product-led, there's inertia there. There's a lot of sort of changes that have to be made. It's sort of it's pretty significant. It's not like you're just flipping on and saying, okay, now we're product-led. And so in that way, I think it is challenging for companies that don't have this. We recently had a portfolio company that wanted to standardize on usage-based. They're currently usage-based, but some of their earliest customers weren't. And there was a lot of work that had to go into planning. What will this look like if we flip them over? What might the churn be? What might the MRR impact be, both in terms of the churn, but also in terms of the upside? And what is the right usage-based plan to put them on where they don't feel that we're just jacking up prices? There was so much sort of scenario planning and if-then kind of cases, and they actually just kicked that off a couple weeks ago. Knock on wood, it's going well so far. But I think that's one mistake I see, is just like not thinking through what is this actually going to do in terms of churn, in terms of expansion, things like that. Julia, what do you think in terms of, I guess 2 things. One is, can companies who don't have this do it? And then what are some of the, ways to go about doing that well when they can try it?
Yeah, I think that definitely is not the easiest journey, right? So there is so many things to do, and I mean, so many analysis to do, and also the workflows we put together in the company that should be entirely analyzed and maybe restructure it. So a company that should be really very mindful about, doing this kind of transaction or transition before doing it, properly. But if this is something that is leading the company to lose money, and I mean lost sales, and not getting traction or not enough traction with the customers that they would like to, or the customer required to, I think that is there's not other way to do, right? So I mean, is the journey that we should do regardless of, I mean, is easy or not. But I definitely think that there is many different ways to create a usage or a usage-based pricing. So when you look at the market and you see like so many companies doing differently, you see, so what will be the most suitable for my case, for my customer, and how can I start? So I agree that with Isabel that say that maybe having like a hybrid model first. So like, I mean, you have like a subscription model that will help us to keep in that fixed pricing in some stage, but the way that we are going to increase pricing is not the traditional, like, I mean, per tier plans, etc. So you can have like the both components in just like one pricing model. It's not easy for sure, but I think that is easier than you move to an entirely like usage-based model that will provoke so many changes and disruptions in your business, and maybe in the way that you are going to market as well. So I think that the best way is like try it out first with something that is like the in between, or maybe just create some kind of offer that could be used for a special case that are not necessarily like public, or not from the large public awareness. And then if you have that customer requiring you, or a potential customer requiring you for that specific user, say, okay, oh hey, this is like something like a special offer for you, so let's agree on this deal and let's close this, or let's transition our contract to a bigger plan in this model. And then you can test it out, before doing all the transition, or like, I mean, going through the setback of doing this.
I really like that. Dipping your toe in the water. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm gonna make a comment. So I actually sit on board of a company called Avocado that moved from an enterprise sales model and pricing model to product-led growth user. That took about a year and a half of actually completely rebuilding the product, transitioning the sort of older customers, and then refocusing the company to become, like I said, product-led growth. So that required like, okay, we don't need the BD and the sales team anymore, right? Like we do, but it was sort of like just there were a lot of changes in the organization. That was brutal.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting. I'm glad you said the changes to the product. A lot of times companies that are sales led and they're thinking about being product led, they don't realize it's not just a go-to-market motion. The product has to be ready for product led as well. And it starts with that. I mean, there's a reason we call it product led, and it's not just about kind of changing how we sort of sell and, acquire customers or expand and retain them, but it's like the actual product itself for sure. So, if you think about one of the things, and I actually am curious if you guys have seen this with usage-based, one thing that I think gets tripped up is actually the mechanics of just the billing operations aspect of this. This is messy. I've not seen very many companies do it well. So when I think about a company that's maybe doesn't have usage-based and now they're switching over to some usage-based, one of the biggest things is like, how do we operationalize this from a billing perspective? Do we have the right billing systems? Can the customer experience be good? I mean, have you seen any, I'm just curious if you've seen that too, or seen anybody handling this well from a billing operations perspective? I still think this is a big area of opportunity to solve a problem for SaaS companies, is better billing operations around it.
Yeah, I haven't seen anybody doing it really well. So I would say, they try to plug in with sort of Stripe and Chargeify or other stuff on the back end, but just it doesn't. And I think my picture's frozen, so I'm sorry for that. But it's very challenging. I still think it's a huge opportunity. I agree with you on that. Huge opportunity.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone is doing this super well, frankly, and most of it's kind of hacked together on the back end.
Yeah, and I would totally. And just so you know, Marvin, we can see and hear you, so no worries. But yeah, I see that too. Like it's, especially like companies like ChargeBee, which are great and they're sort of a go-to product, but you end up with these thousands of different subscription, tiers and everything, and people just kind of, it starts to spiral. And I do think it's an opportunity. Isabel, I have one question for you. As companies might be thinking about trying something like Julio mentioned, can they think about the communication plan to start to message to customers about this, right? So like, what should they be sort of thinking in terms of one-to-one communication or one-to-many communication, expectation setting? I mean, anything for them to think through there, because really we have to have the customers in the boat with us.
Yeah, and actually I was thinking of one or two examples there around for the one-to-many in particular, and I think it will depend on the product, where it is just click to deploy type of platform, type of product, where that communication can actually just be sent out, let's say a few months, just obviously giving the customer that perhaps even the advantage of just the knowledge a few months in advance that, okay, we're going to introduce this pricing model, this is how things are going to be moving forward, etc. So I think, and again, this will be more from the one-to-many motion. I think when it is customers that, as you probably have heard the expression, like more high touch, I think it's more the relationship with, and I think it comes down to having the teams, in this case will be sales, will be product, customer success aligned, saying, well, if it's either customer success delivering that message, or if it is sales, the account manager delivering that to this that high touch type of customer, where that communication can be just given in, I don't know, just if you will have regular touch points with that type of customer, then perhaps it is a little bit easier. But I think it comes more, at least in what I have seen in my experience, more from the account management, which will be more dealing with the fun side of the commercials most of the times. But I think and just going back to that one-to-many customer segmentation that companies might have, that I think is just, and as I say, if you have any sort of news, I'm not saying that it will be bad news to change to a new pricing model, but just providing enough time for the customer just to digest that. And I think as well, it is most of the times we'll be providing actually, okay, what's in it for the customer, that, okay, these changes are happening, but then if they can see some sort of benefit putting that, let's say, the ball back in their courts in terms of, okay, this is how you can manage now your usage moving forward. So that's, so they can actually see the benefit from it as well.
Yeah, definitely. So I want to make sure we have time for some of our other trends. And this trend definitely is tied to our next trend that we want to talk about, which is marketplaces, that I think have really started this. But any final words? I mean, Julio, I know you've got some, practical experience with this too, but like, what could people walk away from this? Like, sort of any kind of final tips or tricks or best practices or things to be thinking about on this topic before we start talking about marketplaces?
I think that definitely is like plan in advance and having like a committee, like internal committee composed by, people from all different areas of the company to make sure that there is no area that will be uncovered, and then probably this will be crash something like just ahead. So I think that this could sound pretty basic, but not everyone has like the sense of how like big a transition like this could be. And how this should be planned way ahead, or in advance, in order to avoid more setbacks than necessarily benefits that we are searching for.
I love that. I mean, I'm a big fan of moving fast and breaking things, but this is not one of those areas you want to do that. I think you really do have to plan and be thoughtful about it. So yeah, and everybody, if there's other questions on usage-based pricing, we can answer them at the end. But I do think that this is somewhat driven by the cloud providers, right? And that's where we're seeing this marketplace trend, which I'm excited to talk about, because I, for one, feel like this is one that's going to catch a lot of SaaS operators off guard if they don't kind of start to think about this. I mean, so I think that, we have companies like Tackle that Andreessen just invested $35 million in Tackle, and Tackle's sole purpose is to help companies get into the marketplaces, right? And some of the numbers around how much purchasing is going to be done and is happening inside of these marketplaces is, just to me, mind-blowing, really. I feel like this kind of came out of nowhere. Even though I operated a business that was in the marketplace, and it's still, to me, so shocking. So, one thing is just, one of you, can you just explain to our group here what marketplaces are. I think that's first and foremost. What do we mean when we're talking about marketplaces? Anybody want to jump on that one?
Yeah, so well, I can jump on this. So marketplace is more like definitely a place that you have products or services and all kind of offerings, available for like self-consumption. For someone that can go there, like an e-commerce, more suitable for B2B interactions, and then prepare for this kind of flow as well. So it's not definitely like a B2B commerce, but I mean something that is bigger than that is more like a B2C marketplace, but for B2B spaces. Like if you see companies like Salesforce and others that have been thriving a lot and making a huge difference on the way they are interacting with other enterprise through marketplace sales, you easily grasp that. But pretty like basic concept is like, definitely like something like an e-commerce for B2B purposes that has like enterprise focused products and services available for self-consumption.
Yeah, I always think about Salesforce App Exchange as like the original OG marketplace, but now so much of it is being driven by the cloud providers. The AWS marketplace, Google has one, Azure has one, and one of the big things, right, is the for the customer, the single point of purchase, right? So it's like there's no like multi-contracts, there's no different procurement process. Like they sort of have a budget for their cloud provider, and then they might be using part of that budget just by purchasing things in the marketplace that there's no different terms and conditions and things like that. It's just all part of this sort of cloud vendor that they're working with. Marvin, what have you seen sort of in terms of marketplaces? Are you finding your companies that you work with are moving into the marketplace or finding that to be a good customer acquisition channel?
Yeah, so a lot of it, like I said, I always use, I keep on going back to the customer segment. So one of the marketplaces I think is really interesting is Shopify's marketplace, right? Like if you're in e-commerce, SMB e-commerce, huge. And so I it's like I said, I think we talked about this, in our call, I think a week ago. I was so dumb, or maybe blind and ignorant, or maybe just busy. One of my portfolio companies, Shippo, like they're, so I'll just say there's timing to this, right? So I do think you really have to understand what that customer segment was. I think they did a very good job of understanding and doing the reach outs with sort of like key customers first and building the case studies and whatnot. Once they figured out and saw that was actually working very, very well, the next thing they did was like, okay, where are more of these people, right? Like, what platforms? Like probably not on the Salesforce App Exchange, but actually Shopify has this, right? And so they actually grew on the back of that, of Shopify, for example, like at least initially for the first couple of years. And so one of the things I will say is that like it's super exciting, these platforms and exchanges and these B2B marketplaces. But I do think you really, really need to understand what your customer segment is first before you go do that. It's not a panacea for like just not thinking about go to market, right? Like not thinking about like not getting customers yourself, where it's like, I'll just build a product and I'll just launch in a marketplace and everything will be great, right? I think that's lazy thinking, and I've never seen that work. I do think you need to be a little bit more thoughtful about that.
Well, particularly because it's easy to get lost in the marketplaces, right? I think you're right. People think it's a panacea. I'll get in the marketplace. I'll get in front of thousands and hundreds of thousands of potential buyers, but there's still work to be done to be seen and recognized there, right? So have you seen what do you kind of see that works really well? I'm just curious. I know there's like Tackle, right, that actually will help you do that, which is just a fascinating business model to me. But anything that you've seen sort of work well or not work well in terms of getting into the marketplaces and then having that be a viable channel for customer acquisition?
One of the things I'll say, so for example, I'm probably a little bit more familiar with Shopify and with with the Salesforce App Exchange, where a lot of times it's actually getting to know your Salesforce contacts really well to help them, to get them to push you as well too. So you almost have to think about these marketplaces as like resellers, right? Of just like, hey, how do I help? How do I make it easy for you to push us, right? Like in the sense of like if they like you, they'll help push you. And so I think a lot of times it's not just sort of like you turn it on and everything's great. Like there is a lot of work and there's a lot of education. There's also a lot of, you almost have to think about it almost like how a CPG company sells, right? Like, yeah, their end, like their end customers is sort of like us, right? The consumer, but ultimately they get paid by their grocery stores, right? The Safeways, the Whole Foods or whatever. So you still had to work with them to go and position your product in the shelf, right? If you think about that. So you almost have to think about it that way, where the marketplace is the grocery store.
Yeah, that's actually a great analogy, right? Yeah. What about you, Julia? What do you see that works well or doesn't work well, or how can companies actually take advantage of this, what is really going to be a significant trend and already is?
Yeah, definitely. So these two examples that we are talking about here, Shopify, Salesforce, one is about like companies that are mature enough and that have like a whole ecosystem around them that can make this reason way more like easier to the consumer to go there and to understand what they need and what they have to like really aggregate value to their business or to their operation itself. But I think that it could be way tougher for someone that is just, a smaller company, smaller startup that doesn't have established presence in the market or even like a solid ecosystem around them to put it together and say, let's start acquiring customer, from the marketplace. So I think that this requires a lot of more attention, and to put the marketplace online is just the beginning of the journey. I think that definitely one thing that is underestimated sometimes is the proper marketplace journey, or how we can enable the one that is just navigating to the marketplace to do it properly and to have the right information and to understand how this could be built, or like how this conversation will happen and what we could expect, because it's not that straightforward as we ideally think that it should be. And sometimes require a lot of support from either like the company, the vendor, or someone from the ecosystem, like a partner that can guide them through and help them to find exactly what they need and to clarify all the doubts before they go to purchase, because otherwise it could be just something useless for the company.
And then there's the customer relationship, right? Like, I think we used to think about things like this, like, well, we won't have the relationship, but if you're buying through the marketplace, or your customers, you're still having the relationship. It's just really the acquisition vehicle. So, do you see anything, Isabel, of like sort of the customer experience that's different for somebody that buys direct on a website versus buys through a marketplace?
Well, the example that I have, I was at Intercom before joining Pluralsight. So I saw that from their Intercom app store, like you will, a lot of those integrations that perhaps already the Intercom customer was looking for. I think it was quite seamless to have, let's say, integrations with Jira or any other similar type of tool. So I think at the end of the day, it comes, as Julie was mentioning there, about that journey. How, if you're going to set up this marketplace, and perhaps from Intercom's use case was, okay, mapping that out, how is that experience going to be for the customer, that perhaps if you're already using, in this case, Intercom as any other products or their platform itself, how can I integrate if this is something that even came from as well, for what I can remember, even from customer feedback, or can you integrate with X or Y? And that's what they have now in their app store. So I think it's just taking the customer and mapping out that customer journey at the end of the day. How does that look like? And if that can be implemented in either a marketplace, app store. So I think that's how it can be successful at the end of the day.
Definitely makes sense. I'm curious if anybody, one of the things I hear sometimes when companies are exploring going into the marketplace is shock at how much you need to pay the marketplace. And I've seen fees everything from 10% to 30% in some marketplaces, and sometimes it is volume. The more that you sell through the marketplace, the lower the fees will be. But that's always the first thing, sticker shock from a founder. What, I'm going to give this marketplace 30% of my revenue, and there's like that question of like, is the growth that I'm going to get from the marketplace going to be worth it? And I'm just curious if you've heard those kind of same surprising moments for founders or teams that go, wait, what? And and then thinking through how to kind of operationalize this new reality.
Nothing's for free, right? It's no different than the Apple App Store. You want the distribution. Yeah. This is your distribution, so you got to pay for it. It's not free. That's actually literally what I tell them. I'm just like, what did you think was going to happen, right? Like, they're not doing this out of the goodness of their heart.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and in my case, it's like I used to have this conversation with partners that are service providers and that are just adding layers of services on top of my product, and then sometimes they just realize it can create some of these extensions and then host in the marketplace and then start make money on that. So why should I invest like the time of my developers, my most senior developers, on developing something that will just have this amount of take rate? I say, yeah, but then you have like the global distribution. No, you have the reach that is way beyond the reach you can get or by yourself. So it's more
Yeah.
and more about like a win-win situation. No, we have to put this together, and we are capitalizing on the market reach you have, and we are just bringing you together. So I think that is just the sense of painting the full picture, then just seeing like the cost and say, yeah, but we did it out by ourselves, so why should we pay for that? But the market opportunity could be huge as well.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's where you're really seeing the shift of 10 years ago, 5 years ago, SaaS founders were like, why would I do that? I can do it direct. And this is all changing. We'll definitely talk about this as we get into channel as well. But I'm curious, why is it so hard for companies to actually do the work to get into these marketplaces? Why do we need a tackle, right? A company that's dedicated just to getting companies into the marketplace and getting 35 million from, Andreessen. What are the challenges with actually getting into the marketplace and getting that as kind of stood up as a viable acquisition channel? Why is this hard?
Yeah, that's, so many reasons. I do think that, like I said, there's a technical integration piece, right? I think there's an account management piece of just sort of how, there's a technical integration. There's also business integration and process integration. How do you support it on the back end too, on your side? There's also customer segmentation thing of just like, is this going to grow, sort of, are they similar? Are they different? Are you going to be gutting your own sales team as well too, as they're, for their leads? There's a lot of challenges with this, right? On every single front, not just technical, but process and business. And like the reason why I'm a fan of this only works when you have very clear customer segmentation, right? Like, for example, like it's an enhancement of your present customer segmentation, or you're going to completely different customer segmentation. That could totally work. But if it's the same one, you have to think about the cannibalization piece, right? Like, just like, are you, how does that affect your, there's a lot of questions it raises.
There really is. Even just thinking about a current customer that wants to go buy through the marketplace instead right now. So we already had them, and now they're saying, well, it's easier for me to buy through the marketplace, but I renew there and expand there. And now you're thinking, am I booking that as churn, right? Like, because they're coming off of a direct and they're going to go through the marketplace. Now I wasn't paying 30% for that customer, and now I am. There's that piece, which is complicated. Also, just even, what do you do with your sales team, right? Am I going to be double comping now if a salesperson is working with a customer who then ends up buying in the marketplace? Like, what are the rules of engagement? Who am I, I'm going to be sort of paying out a commission and that? And different companies handle this differently. Like, when I first started selling through a marketplace, I had very, very clear rules of engagement. We were not going to pay the reps on that unless it was, had just been within days, literally. But I've seen that doesn't really work. That's not really how that doesn't really honor sort of the customer journey. If a customer is having a great sales experience with a person, and they want to buy through the marketplace, like that is their, sort of right to do. So even if they've spent two months exploring with a salesperson, so there's a lot of just logistical stuff here to work through as well. I'm curious, have you seen any of those types of complexities with companies that you work with?
Yeah, and I think that there is one more topic here, which is like sometimes the companies overestimate the time that it would take to them to start making real money on that. And they forget that, the cultural shift from customers to start really going through a marketplace to buy things that you used to have, like someone that is account manager dedicated that will call in then. And doing all the kind of stuff that we know that is needed sometimes to make money on the technology business. It just, the cultural shift that take longer. No, it took us a pandemic to start moving to like remote work. So for sometimes a shift like this, which is not a small one, is a huge one, would take maybe longer. So I think that is also like companies need to calibrate more about like the expectations they have and the return on investment will come over time. And maybe they should be focusing more on the lead indicators first than the end goal. I think, I mean, this is my thought about it.
I love that. Yeah. And, I think I want to wrap up so we have time for everything else. But, one of the things that just, and again, it was a tackle survey, but one of the things that the tackle data showed from the survey was the customers who really figure out how to have emotion in the marketplaces are closing deals like 25 to 50% faster. You think about that, even that business impact and what that means, like that is a compelling enough, from my perspective, I think. And then, having access even to bigger budgets that are already established because the companies have put aside a cloud provider budget, and we're taking out of that. So I think there's a lot of compelling reasons. But one of our attendees noted that this sounds a lot like a channel strategy, which is a great segue into the next topic, which is, sort of partnerships and channel strategy. And this one's so interesting to me because I'm a SaaS, OG. My first SaaS was like, when SaaS wasn't even necessarily a term. And it was about selling direct. And I think we had this idea of like, you were either channel or you were selling direct. And they were two things that didn't really crossover. And I think we're seeing more blending of that hybrid. And I think we're seeing more recognition in SaaS that their channel could be a viable strategy, and sort of partnerships as well. So I know all three of you have a lot of experience in this, and I think one question I have is, why do you think the shift? Why are we seeing 10 years ago we weren't really talking about channel and make partnerships to some degree, but not like today, where you're really seeing people say, wait, this might be a viable path to accelerate growth. Why the shift?
Too much noise in the marketplace. There's just so many more products, and it's so busy. So it's hard to stand out now. Yeah. And this is another one, right, where we have to shift our expectations as operators, where we are going to pay like channel, right? It's going to be 30%, right? And but to your point, like we have access to a different set of customers that we might have on our own, in a faster sort of broader market too. So do partnerships and channel make sense for any SaaS? Where does it not make sense?
Well, that's a tough question. What doesn't make sense? Because I remember that in the beginning of the last decade, I mean, everyone was saying that the channel business will disappear if the cloud business will really take off, because the minimal like need for like configuration, implementation, integration, you will make like some of kind of partners appear. But what actually had happened was more companies became partners, of technology companies than ever before. Like now you have digital marketing agencies, accounting offices, even firms becoming like real like partners of this kind of new SaaS integration or like technologies that are helping like this kind of business to really disrupt the way they're doing business. So I think that is really hard to us to find a place that there's no space for ecosystem, even though maybe this is not the traditional way that we used to have before. Now, when we were talking about like on-prem or more traditional business. So I think that it's not about to think about partners or partnerships as the traditional VARs or MSPs, etc. But how can we think about like the ecosystem that we have around the company, or that is around like our customer or target market, and start connecting these bridges or connecting these dots, and just orchestrating this ecosystem in some senses that will serve you for you as a partner, even though not is as the traditional kind of partnership model.
I think you're so right. And it's an interesting thing that you mentioned about just even like service providers. Like we have a portfolio company that has relationships with consultants, which often you think would be small. And these relationships are driving significant revenue because these consultants are already in the customer working. So they're recommending the software. And I'm blown away by their referral channel. And they've just gone out and created these individual relationships kind of within their ecosystem of this sort of subject matter expertise. And I think that's even, you think about that kind of as like a slow roll, right? Like you've got to build a relationship with a person, you've got to find them, you've got to build that, and you've got to get that person, actually delivering some referrals. But I'm so surprised at the value that it's creating inside of this organization just through individual relationships. So I think that's super interesting. Why do you think so many of these types of partnerships that people explore, especially early SaaS founders who haven't done a lot of it, why do they fizzle out? Like when we come together with somebody that's maybe in our ecosystem, we think we're going to do a partnership, and then value's not delivered on either side, or maybe just for one side. Like, why is that?
Well, what I have been seeing is sometimes where some founders or some companies are underestimating what is required to really put together just a minimum, partnership ecosystem, or a minimum partnership time in place. The amount of research you should put upfront on enablement, on cultural shift inside your company, on so many things, and obviously that this requires time. There's one statement here that I remember that I heard, and for me is perfect for the occasion here, is for the channel, what to put in is what to get out first. And if you have time, go channel. If you have money, go direct. So just, to illustrate and encapsulate that, two beliefs that necessarily is not, 100% true, but illustrate the majority of the cases. So it took a lot of, upfront investment to put this in place, and it requires time to start grasping the full benefits you can have for that. So, and not every time, not like often, a company that is like growing 3 times per year, and 2 times the next year, and 3 times next year, will have the necessarily patience to make this, or even the VCs that are investing in the company wouldn't make. So it's a tough one, and I think that in order to prevent companies to do this, it's just about to start small and to start with an MVP, and choose the partnership type right in the first, and start operating this, and it's a slow scale, because what doesn't require that amount of time and effort could have more time to mature, and then you have more time to really make these step by step and achieve the success you can have for that.
Do you have any specific things that are sort of minimal viable, table stakes things you have to sort of support a partnership? Or I think people don't know, what do those things look like, right? So even just very tactically, operationally, you've got to have somebody who can get on the phone with the partner probably every week, or every month, or in the beginning every week,
day, or I would say every day.
Yeah. So what are some of those things? Because I think that's the thing. People don't know, what are those things I'm going to have to do to make this partnership successful?
Account management, training, right? Actually, training materials and some training modules online or with person, sales and marketing collateral. And like I said, I mentioned is this account management, you're on the phone with them every day, pretty much, right? You're there to support them. And to answer your first question, is why do these things fizzle out or fail? I think it's unrealistic expectations on both sides and a mismatch of timeline, right? The startup thinks well, I'll just I give you the product and you'll just sell it, right? And then the big companies say, well, no, you need to go and what's the revenue share? How how are we going to get buy-in from sort of other key players and stakeholders in the organization? What's the support plan? And these things, or a lot of times, they oversell to each other. Actually, most of the time, they oversell to each other.
Yeah.
And actually, other cornerstones, geo partner profile, to start to focus. This enablement plan, as Martin said, the training, the technical, the go-to-market, the industry-specific training. Sometimes someone that will be doing this day-to-day management of the partner journey, as well as mapping the partner journey in order to assess we are progressing, and they show this progress as well to the VCs, to the CEO, to everyone that will be involved, to understand that things are moving, and they are not stuck because we are not having a spectacular amount of sale in the bottom line. So I think that these are just two complementary things that can really mitigate the risk of not having this done.
Yeah, definitely. Isabel, I'm curious about like the customer experience in all of this, right? Like we're so used to as SaaS companies just we acquire the customer directly, we run the customer relationship directly, but now we have all these customers kind of coming in from different channels, different expectations. Did our partner set the right expectations? Did we train them? So I'm just kind of curious, sort of how do we make a great customer experience in all of this?
Yeah, and actually, I know this is Julia's wheelhouse for sure, but I just wanted to add as well that working with channel before and with MSPs in emerging markets, that I think that alignment has to exist 100%. If not, definitely will fizzle out. But I think when it comes to the customer, I think as well, it is either if we do have an organization, a channel manager, partner manager, etc. The title. If we can actually just from that alignment alone, that okay, the reseller, the MSP, the VAR will actually is bringing these customers, and I think it comes down to knowing that the customer is using our platform, our products. In a way, we are sharing that relationship, and sometimes it can be a challenge. Especially, I saw this from emerging markets as well, because I think, in just as a quick example, if the customer is in Turkey and the reseller is actually as well in Turkey, they might have already that connection because of the language. I would not have had Turkish, unfortunately, so they will already have that synergy, that quick connection, just because of the same language. So I think it's just, again, and we will put as well customer outcomes at the forefront, but at the same time, because we are dealing with a reseller as well as a channel manager, channel partner, you also have to know that, okay, the reseller also has to make margins. They also need to be enabled, as Marvin and Julia were mentioning already. But I think it's just for that customer experience is that, first of all, we have to be aligned in the back end, like between ourselves, the organization, and the channel, the resellers beforehand.
Yeah, and I think designing things with that in mind, right? Because a customer, even they might be, if they bought through a channel or even through a marketplace, where are they going to for support, for whatever it might be, training? Like, who are they getting that from? I think that all has to be sort of determined, so that and if a customer sort of plays outside of the lanes that you think that they should be in, right, that the teams that are supporting that customer are prepared for that, right? So that I think that's so important for sure. Anything else that you saw when you were working in the emerging markets and sort of the MSPs and everything, things that worked well or things that didn't work well in particular that stand out?
I think a few years back when we were able to travel, I think definitely it makes a difference. I mean, I think now we're relationship builders virtually, so it is a new skill that we have. But I think if we know that the partners, the resellers, if they are enabled, if they know, as Marvin said, that sometimes we have to be on the phone with them or answering emails or on Zoom calls every day. So they know that, I mean, because before we were able just to visit them, do a week of enablement, what they need, etc. But now that if we have that remote relationship, I think it's just trying to pay attention of their circumstances, and similar to what we will be doing with a customer, let's say, just trying to think what are their challenges, where are the opportunities for them. And I think I have used the acronym, what's in it for me. So what's in it for the partner, that we want them to be successful as well. We want them to hit targets, revenue, etc. So I think if we can look at that first, I think that partnership can only get stronger.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point. I want to make sure that we have some time to wrap up, and I want to talk a little bit about some of the things we're seeing in the customer experience trends as well, because a lot of evolution happening there. But before we do, we had a question going back to marketplaces for a minute. Adam was asking, have we seen evidence of security SaaS products selling well through any of the marketplaces? I'm curious, have you seen any of that? I mean, logic would say yes, right? I mean, certainly these are, especially through the cloud marketplaces where security is top of mind to that type of buyer too. But I'm just curious if you think of any examples of that.
The cloud services marketplaces, to be honest, I haven't seen it. I feel like the security SaaS space is still kind of a mess. So I don't know. I think, like I said, outside of the integrations with some of these cloud marketplaces, I haven't really seen anything outside of that too much. But that's just me. I'm not necessarily an expert in the cloud security side, though.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, let's talk really quickly before we wrap here. I want to make sure we leave a minute at the end, just kind of for some closing statements. But we talked a little bit when we were together last week about some of these emerging customer experience trends and managing customer relationships at scale too. And I think one thing was AI that has come up. You know, I have a little bit of experience in that. I would used to say, no way would I ever have my customers interacting with, you know, AI sort of driven experience. And I am now a believer, but I'm curious what you guys are seeing in terms of just managing customers' relationships at scale, but keeping a focus on sort of the customer experience and being customer centric. Isabel, why don't you lead us off, since this is definitely you are more well versed than we are.
I was trying to unmute myself. Yeah, I think when it comes to scaling that, as you said, Anna, when we were trying to just think of trends, I will say chatbot, for example, that even in just thinking again of Intercom, that I think if they can either enable, and I know maybe the use case that many people will know will be more from the support side of things, but even what I saw as well and what they are really good at will be that lead generation as well from their website, and many customers that have actually implemented that. I can think of Drift as well will be another as well similar use case, and I think it's just trying to utilize, if it's either automation, not only in the way we interact with customers, but as well in the back end, where, as earlier we were mentioning about how to communicate, let's say, any price changes, or how can we actually automate that type of communication. So, and as well, something that we were discussing as well for upcoming trends and what's happening right now in the market will actually be that personalization. And I think we are seeing that even ourselves. I can think of the example of the ads that Signal released of how data is being used by Instagram and Facebook, that I think all of that right now, and well, actually on that privacy will be perhaps even just another trend that the consumer can be more aware of in this case of privacy settings and cookies and all of that stuff, now with different players, not only WhatsApp being the only player, but now with Signal and Telegram. So I think it's just that type of trends that I think at the end of the day are putting the consumer or the customer at the center. I think that's perhaps where I will see trends going moving forward.
Yeah. And I think with any of this stuff, it's also just comes down to how well we execute it, right? Like even just going back to chatbots, for example, this morning at like 4 a.m., I happened to be on a partner company website, one of our portfolio companies, and I noticed I was looking at a competitor site that they both had chat boxes open. So I said, let me just go through both in parallel. And, one led me to a really nice experience where I was able to kind of go through, ask some questions, do the tree, get what I wanted. And one kind of led me to a dead end. I won't say which company was which, but, I just thought to myself, here are two competitors, both having a, chat, sort of interacting with customers off hours, and one being a phenomenally executed experience that would probably propel a prospect through their journey, and one just kind of being a dead end. So I think that just highlights all of this stuff that we do has to be executed well, right? Yes, we want to move fast, break things, do things quickly, be agile, but we have to be thoughtful about usage-based pricing and how we roll it out. We have to be thoughtful about what we're investing in marketplace or partnerships and relationships. We have to be thoughtful about how we're designing the customer experience. And more than anything, that's, I think, the heart of being successful. Before we end here in a minute, first of all, if anybody has any questions, definitely feel free to pop them in. If we don't get to them, we will follow up afterwards. But I wanted to just wrap by asking each of you, if people that were attending today, this session, and what is like one thing that they should take away and be thinking about to kind of future-proof their SaaS? What is the one thing you'd want them to kind of take away from today? Julio, you're first. So my panel. So let's go with you first.
No, I think that we talked about different ways of being customer-centric here, and put your customer in the center and doing changes in your business in the way to serve better your customers and to connect better with your target audience. So just, think more about it and work hard on this. And put literally not only your customer, but I was talking with my CEO this week and say, being an ecosystem, or end user, centric. Whether it's a customer or a partner or someone, just not really reminding someone that what about the channel? No, channel should be put first as well. If you are ecosystem-centric business. So this is my 2 cents.
I love it. Awesome. Isabel, you're next in my panel here.
Yeah, for me, I would say that's the key takeaway, either to think your long-term, but also your short-term strategy. And again, it might look different depending your platform, your products, but also taking consideration the customer journey for sure.
Love it. And Marvin, how about you?
I've harped on this a lot. Go to market, your support, everything stems from having a good sense of what your customer segmentation is.
Yeah, you've mentioned customer segmentation a few times, and I think I wish we had time to dig into that more, because I completely agree. And I think the one thing I would just say is, for founders and operators that joined us today, be open to different paths to customer acquisition. If you've been thinking your primary path to growth is going to be direct, that may be the case, but be open to exploring other ways, whether it's be, from partnerships, referral relationships, who is in your ecosystem, what's marketplaces, whatever, and be open to exploring that as well as another path to growth. So, that's it. Our time is up. I was so enjoyed listening to you guys and getting to know you over the last couple of weeks. I know who to call when I have questions on any of these topics. I'll be hunting you guys down, because I just really enjoyed hearing all of your wisdom and your thoughts. But I think, Gemma, we're done for right now.
Absolutely. And thank you so much to you for moderating as well. It was a really interesting session. And obviously from the amount of comments that were there, all of our attendees thought so too. So thank you all so much for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Take care.
Yeah, I know.